parts that I read for, and then in the end, without even knowing what I was doing, they're like, okay, you're this little blonde girl. I'm like, all right. And for a while, Winry doesn't do much. She just, I think her first line is, that sounds like Edward, like little tiny Winry. And then they're like, you know, this is a pretty important role. I said, is it? Apparently it was, because when I went to a convention that fall, and I was just there, I was not a guest, I was just at the convention. It's actually the first time I met him. Somebody on a panel pointed me out in the audience, like one of the other voice actors, said, oh, and then there's Caitlin, and she's new, and she's Winry, and everyone's like, pounding me the rest of the time. So that's how I ended up being a part of the show, and the second time around, I still live there, so I got to keep doing the part.
I had done several shows at Funimation. The first show that I did at Funimation, I lived in Houston, Texas, and I worked for ADV Films in Houston. And then I met some people at Funimation, and I started doing some work up there. I did Dragon Ball Z, and Yu Yu Hakusho, and Kitty Grade, and Case Closed, and Spiral. And then they got Full Metal Alchemist, and I went up to audition for it. And they had this book, an audition folder, with sides, what they call sides, in it. It's basically one sheet of paper with a picture of the character, and then a paragraph describing the character, and then a handful of lines that the character would be likely to say. So, thank you. Is this vodka? Yeah, that's good. And so I went up and I was leafing through the book and looking at the different characters. Now, mind you, I knew nothing about Full Metal Alchemist. Had never heard of it. I had recently done a show called Full Metal Panic. And so I thought, well, this is like the same thing. It's the same words. So I'm looking through the book and I'm looking at different characters. And what you do as an actor is you'll try to identify roles that you feel like you might be able to do a good job with. So I saw like Armstrong and I'm like, okay, he's huge. He's probably got this big booming voice. That's not gonna be me. So why read for him, right? And then I'm like, oh, who's this robot? Yeah, he's probably too young. I probably can't do him. Who's this? Roy Mustang. He looks stupid. So then I come across this little kid in a red coat. Now, mind you, I don't know the show, which means he may have 10 lines. I don't know how he plays into the show at all. So I'm reading the description, and I'm like, okay, so Justin Cook, who was at the time originally going to direct Full Metal, before he was promoted, he came out of the studio and he said, hey, did you look at the sides? Who do you want to read for? And I said, well, I kind of like this red coat kid. He looks fun, and Justin got this little smile on his face, and he said, I hoped you would think that because I thought you might do a good job with him too. And we need to prepare an episode to premiere at OTAKUTHON in Baltimore in a handful of weeks. So I'm just going to have you record the whole first episode as that character. Now, I wasn't cast, mind you. I was just going to record it temporarily for them to have it ready for OTAKUTHON. Larkin Seal, who sang Ready, Steady, Go, was going to be a musical guest, so they wanted to have this big Full Metal premiere that year. So I recorded the whole show, and when I did, I realized, oh, this kid's kind of important. He's like, in Full Metal Alchemist, he's like the Full Metal Alchemist. So I loved it, and I knew nothing about it, but then started a big waiting game where they didn't cast, and didn't cast, and didn't cast. And I started getting these emails and finding out more about the show and realizing that it was a very popular show, just like Caitlin said. So ultimately, I got the call that I was going to be playing the character, and then I started getting emails saying, you better not screw it up. You guys, I had probably done 40 shows by that time, and I had never received an email from a fan saying, you better not screw up this anime. So that was the first indication that it was going to be a pretty big show, an important show that had a fan base, that people were paying close attention to the show and the English dub. So that's my story.